we're going to do an actor's studio style interview with the director. So please welcome our department head, Tim Pennell.
We now have two preacher's kids up here, so good luck.
Which really just means you're never leaving.
That's right.
So, exactly. So, Tim, we're going to start off by asking a couple easy questions.
Good, good.
I want you to start with telling us how many Shakespeare plays you have directed, or fight choreographed, or played in.
Jeremy told me he was going to ask you that, so I had to go and count. 36.
36. 36.
36.
That's why he's the Shakespeare expert and not me. There you go. So, can we ask, which was your favorite role to play? A Shakespeare role.
Henry V. It's my favorite play.
And which one's your favorite to direct? Is it the same answer?
No. I think the favorite, in terms of favorite shows that I've directed, I worked for several years with Shakespeare on the Rocks in El Paso, Texas. And I'm not sure they even exist anymore. I don't think they do. But they have this lovely, huge 2,500 seat outdoor amphitheater that backs up. It would be like putting an amphitheater up against the book cliffs, like literally right up against the book cliffs. And the back is open up the hillside. So I actually got to have Burnham Wood come to Dunsinane down the hill. And that's one I will always treasure, because I don't think you always try and figure out how you're going to do that. I just did it. I had a mountain there, so I used it. So that's probably
The Scottish play.
the Scottish play, yes.
And so, what role, Shakespeare role, have you never played that you wish you could play?
Yeah, I didn't remember that one. I've hit all my biggies. I think maybe, give me another couple of years and I'd like a shot at Lear.
Did you hear that? We can expect King Lear in 4 years. I heard that. And what about to direct?
I really love the ones that are obscure. I have to admit. I think I've done more than 10 Romeo and Juliets between acting, fight directing, and directing, and I don't really feel the need to do it again after 10. But some of the obscure ones, there's one, here's how much of a Shakespeare geek I am. Last year, the Arden Publishing Company, which is one of the premier publishers of Shakespeare's plays, was convinced enough by some new research, linguistic research, that we have found one of Shakespeare's lost plays. There are 2 plays that we know he wrote, because we have either records of payments for them, or references in some kind of advertising. Love's Labour's Won, which is a sequel to Love's Labour's Lost, and a play called Cardenio. And there's been a play that had been right around 1700 had been said, the person who published it said, this is Cardenio, this is Shakespeare's Cardenio, and it sort of gave a provenance, but everybody quickly dismissed it and said it's a hoax. It was called Double Falsehood. And so for like 300 years, people thought, oh, that was just a hoax that somebody's trying to make a buck. Well, a couple of English professors in Britain did some very sophisticated research, and they are now more than 95% sure it's Shakespeare's play. So they published it. I haven't read it yet, and it's killing me. So stuff like that, I want to see if I can make that thing work. Or Two Noble Kinsmen would be another fun one to work on. I'm sure you've all read that. Cymbeline, all those sort of obscure ones, I'd like a shot at those.
Okay, great. So, then tell us, what is it and when was it that you first fell in love with the bard?
You'll read this in my director's notes if you see them tonight. But when I was in 4th grade, it's either 4th grade or 5th grade, I'm not sure. But I was one of those precocious children who liked to read a lot. And as I said, tell people off, and I had no friends, so that's what I had, was books. And so I was looking through, my mother was an English teacher who became a librarian, and she had this shelf of books. And I said, what's the big one? And she pulled it down, and it was the complete works. And I said, where do I start? And she said, well, start with Romeo and Juliet. So I did. And by the time I left high school, I had read them all. And so that's really where it started. I was also very lucky. There's a very well-known professional Shakespeare company in this country. It used to be solely Shakespeare, called the American Players Theater in Spring Green, Wisconsin, outdoor theater. And they formed when I was in high school. And so I got to, I had a high school English teacher who took us to see it. I fell in love with it. We got to talk to the artistic directors, and that was probably when the die was cast. I still, in fact, I have my mother's, I still have that complete works, I keep it. I even have my grandmother's, in fact, I have it over here. This was I collect, this is how much of a Shakespeare geek I am. I collect old copies of Shakespeare plays. Many of you, I don't know if many of you know, they used to come out as serials, almost like a magazine, in the early part of the 20th century. So this was actually my grandmother's. It's her name in it, from Carl Schurz High School in Chicago. And this one was published in 1920. I have some that go back to 1850. So it's kind of a family tradition, I guess.
So, I saw the show, first of all, let me say that. I saw it last night, thoroughly enjoyed it. We frequently, when we're picking shows, there are people who want us to do more Shakespeare. There are people who want us to never ever do it again. When those second folks show up and ask why it is that we still do this. And of course, just to point out, we do a Shakespeare show every 4 years. It's a part of the repetition for a standard acting directing major. An acting directing major, sometime in their 4 years here, will get a Shakespeare play. So why should we keep it?
Well, let me first ask the question, how many of you remember reading Shakespeare in high school? Okay. How many of you hated it? You were sort of like a 12-step program. Most people I talked to hated that experience. And you might have to close your ears for a second, Jeff. She's from the English department. And here's the reason why. They were never meant to be read. Ever. Shakespeare didn't write them down himself. He didn't want them read by someone. He wanted people to see them. And there is a dramatic difference between reading it. I don't like really reading the Shakespeare plays. I read them all because I'm fascinated by Shakespeare and his use of language. But do I like reading plays? No, because my brain is automatically trying to figure out, how do I make this alive? How do I make this action? And what do these words tell me about action? The actions that are going on. Because the only stage directions you get in Shakespeare are things like, they fight. That's what you get. So it tells you nothing else. They fight. So you've got to figure out what Shakespeare meant. What was he trying to do with these things? And for me, the real reason that actors need to keep working on Shakespeare, any actor, not just a Shakespeare freak, but any actor, is because of the language. There's no other reason to do Shakespeare. The man never had an original thought in his life. He stole every single story from somebody else. Okay? I don't know what to write. Oh, let me just write something about history. Right? He stole, he borrowed, he flat out plagiarized. But what he did have that no one else has ever had, he's the demarcation between Middle English and modern English. He is the first modern English writer. And the reason is his command of the language is unparalleled. He had a working vocabulary, we think, of somewhere around 37,000 words. People like me, relatively well-educated college professor, have a working vocabulary of about 14,000 words. My students have 4. They're all 4 letters. They're all 4 letters. But the average American has a working vocabulary somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 words. So his ability to take something like, but soft with light through yonder window breaks, it is the east and Juliet is the sun, which means nothing more than, hey, there's a light on. It's Juliet's room. That is the sum total of those 2 lines. But somehow saying, but soft, light through yonder window breaks, it is the east or Juliet is the sun. Means a whole lot more than, hey, there's a light on! And so that ability with language is really what we have to teach actors, because words can mean what we want them to mean. Take the word love. How many million ways can you say that word and have it mean a different thing, including its exact opposite? Oh, I really love that. Right? We will always take all the other information and it will supersede the dictionary, the denotative meaning of the word. So Shakespeare has shaped these things so that we have this language that's so rich that it transcends the language. And that's what we have to teach actors, because if you've ever heard a 20-year-old talk, they need that. Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
Right?
That's fine.
That's why.
You're not wrong.
So, that's a great segue for us. The name of today's talk is called the Shakespeare Code. And the main proponent that we want to cover today is the idea of first folio. So Tim, can you talk about what first folio means?
Sure. Because long before there was the internet, when people like me needed to study the first folio of Shakespeare, which is the first printed version, 1623, we are almost 100% sure it was written down by some of his actors because they all memorized the plays, they were in repertoire. This book is full of BS, Bill Shakespeare. It's a little Shakespeare joke there. You guys gotta laugh or this is gonna get long. So if you look,
That joke is not in the show.
this is what the first folio looks like. Okay, and I'm going to put it on the document camera so you can see an individual page. But those of us who really get into this sort of thing have realized, first of all, because I already mentioned that Shakespeare was the beginning of early modern English, as such, the rules of English were not developed fully. Shakespeare signs, of his signatures, he signs his own name with 4 different spellings. Okay? So spelling, for one, was not yet codified in the same way that we have it today. Can I get you to focus that for me? Same thing with grammar, same thing with punctuation, same thing with capitalization. Much of the capitalization reflects the Germanic influences of English during the Middle Ages because now they're capitalized, but that's not always true. So we have this sort of language that kind of goes everywhere, and the reason you don't want to read Shakespeare is because modern editors edit it for reading, which is a different thing than editing it for speaking. So this is toward the end of Act 2, I think, in All's Well That Ends Well, which, by the way, Shakespeare, in the folio, it's all is well that ends well. I'm sure Shakespeare said all's well that ends well, because it's iambic pentameter. But that's just one example of things that change. So, if we look, this is the King of France line at the top here. Fair maids, send forth thine eye, this youthful parcel of noble bachelors, stand at my bestowing. Okay, that's the first 2 lines there. If you were to look at that, first of all you go, it's going to take me a while to read this, right? It slows you down a little, which is not a bad thing. But also, I'd ask you to look at, let's look at spelling first. What do you notice that is spelled differently?
S.
The S is a typecase difference. I'm actually asking about actual spelling of words. The first 2. The first 2 are spelled differently. They have that silent E on the end. That's what I learned to call it, right? When I was growing up, phonics, the silent E. What's the silent E do to a vowel?
Makes it long.
It makes it long. So if you were going to say those first two words and make the vowels longer, how would they sound? Fair maid. Instead of fair maid. Okay? We keep going. Send forth thine eye, this youthful, two L's, parcel of noble bachelors. Now we're getting into consonants. Repetition of a consonant. Stand at my bestowing. Or, again with the silent E, whom both sovereign, look at the spelling there. A-I-G-N-E, power, and Father's voice I have to use. That's what it is. Use. Yeah, that's another typecase thing. The use looks like use. So, if you were to read this out of a modern edition, you would say, fair maid, send forth thine eye, this youthful parcel of noble bachelors, stand at my bestowing. Or whom both sovereign power and Father's voice I have to use. Alright, that's the first two thoughts. If we look at the folio, and that suggests how we speak the words, we get fair maid, send forth thine eye, this youthful parcel of noble bachelors, stand at my bestowing, or whom both sovereign power and Father's voice I have to use. So simply by playing with that spelling, Shakespeare has given us a key to what it means, to how it's said and what he's trying to accomplish by saying the words. If we go out a little farther, frank election make, thou hast power to choose, and they none to forsake. To each of you one fair and virtuous mistress fall when love please, married to each but one. Married, I should say. Married to each but one. All of that just comes from spelling. There are times you'll also see where we would have two L's and there's only one. Okay? So that gives us one clue. Then if we then move down to, let's talk about punctuation. If you see punctuation, first of all, commas are not used anything like they are used now. They are thrown in there almost like throwing darts on a wall. They're everywhere. Okay? Sometimes they would be just where we put them. Often they are all over the place. When we speak a comma, when we're working from the first folio, we're going to pretend that if the energy that we're speaking with is level 1, each time we get a comma, we're going to go up one level. Okay? And it's going to create a natural build within the line. So, this first line ends up becoming fair maid, send forth thine eye. This youthful parcel of noble bachelors stand at my bestowing. Or whom both sovereign power and the Father's voice I have to use. Okay? See how it begins to build towards something? It begins to tell us what's important just by using those. Now, if we also look at there to use, we have a semicolon. This one's easy. You've all learned this, right? What's a semicolon for? When do we use it? Anybody? Two independent clauses, two separate thoughts of equal value. Okay? Connected but of equal value. They could stand on their own. Right? A colon, the full thought after the colon is an additional comment or additional material about what's before a colon. Did I get those right? Yes! Good. Alright. So, we now know that what's after that colon is equal to what comes before it. So that means the same place, the same value that we gave that long first sentence of 3.5 lines, we have to give to the second sentence of a line and a half. Okay? So what comes after that semicolon, thy frank election make, thou hast power to choose, and they none to forsake. It has to end in the same place that the one before it did. Okay? We should also know there's no exclamation points. They didn't exist at this time. So when you read a Shakespeare play, you see all these exclamation points, particularly after the word "oh." I don't know, modern editors just go, don't know what to do with that, put an exclamation right there. Those did not exist in his time. Question marks did, parentheses did, a dash does, hyphens do. Hyphens really get used in this period. So those all come from just looking at that. Now, go back and look at capitalization. In this case, in these cases, it's almost all nouns. But we do have an adjective capitalized, noble bachelors, right? Noble and fair. We've capitalized those. It is at the beginning of the line with fair. Maybe it would have been capitalized, maybe it wouldn't. We don't know for sure what Shakespeare intended, but we certainly know that noble is an adjective for bachelors, right? So now we know that that's an important word because it's been capitalized. So what's Shakespeare trying to say? He's trying to particularly reference that these people he's talking about are noble. That's going to become very important in the story of the play because the person that can choose, Helena, is a commoner. He's giving her a choice of any noble in the kingdom to marry for saving his life. So Shakespeare said noble is important. And so he's given us information about what the action of the play is. So that, before I bore you all, I could go on for a long time with this, but that is essentially how we take this stuff apart when we use the folio. We use the original punctuation, the original spelling. It gets far more complicated than this. And then we look at things like iambic pentameter. You all remember that from high school, right? Da-dum, 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 da-dum. Because iambic pentameter isn't particularly important for actors in the sense that the last thing you want to hear is but soft, but light, through yonder, through wind, because within 10 minutes you're all seasick. Right? But it does become important because but soft means a whole different thing than but soft. So it does become important in trying to figure out which words are the most important. So that's basically the Shakespeare Code. I spent about 8 hours with the actors on a Saturday running them through all this stuff as well as pronunciation and all sorts of other things.
In one paragraph.
In one what?
One paragraph.
And that's just one paragraph, right?
So our last question, thank you Tim.
Sure.
Our last question is, I'm going to make it a two-part, is can you briefly tell us about the time and place of this production?
I have no idea. I violated one of my own directorial rules. Actually, I've always hated Shakespeare where someone says, well, there's really no time period. It's just everywhere. Or it's post-apocalyptic. I never get those. I don't understand. I wanted someone to make a choice. I didn't make a choice. On this one, I said, what I know is this is a very modern story. If we were looking at this story through a modern lens, Helena, okay, the heroine of the story, is actually a stalker. She is. In modern lens, she's a stalker. In fact, she's actually a sexual predator. Yeah. And the guy, our hero of the story, jerk is too mild a word. He's class A jerk. Leading to one of those four-letter words that students like to use. Okay? And so, I'm fascinated by that because it's still a comedy. They still end up together. How do we make it? It's not going to be a happy love story. It's not going to be a pure love story. It's a love story that's fraught with difficulties and challenges and obstacles. And that seems very modern to me. And so my response was, I don't want to just set it in modern times because the language is higher than that. So let's just put it somewhere. So I don't know where it is. I don't know what time it is. The costumes that Jill's created have influence of Greek in there. They have modern influences. We're combining modern fabrics with furs. I think it works, but you'll have to tell me. So,
Last thing is, can you tell us what we should keep an eye out for?
stuff like that listen for when you hear words coming out that help you understand what's going on, because Shakespeare can be hard to follow. Don't be surprised if the first 10 minutes you are lost. That happens to me when I go see a Shakespeare play. If I haven't been working on Shakespeare, it takes my ear about 10 minutes to get accustomed to the language. But about 10 minutes in, you'll suddenly start going along with it and understanding much more clearly.
This play takes you to the finish.
I hope so. I hope so. You know, that's one of the things that you have to decide. I think that many times, particularly when doing Shakespeare, I want it to be exceptionally clear. That's what I always go for. Can it be understood by our audience? Sometimes you'll have problems, sometimes I have problems, sometimes it'll be real clear for you. So pay attention to those moments where the language sort of suddenly sparkles. That's the real genius of Shakespeare. Thank you, Tim.